The grand hall of Accord was deathly quiet. No sound, no breath, no movement, save for the echo of leather soles on polished obsidian. A single human figure walked the length of the chamber tall, cloaked in matte black fabric, stitched with the subtle shimmer of planetary sigils. The thousand assembled species, from silicon-tendrilled Intari to the winged Ashari elders, watched with a blend of contempt and restrained amusement. The council was vast, ancient, eternal. And this was the best humanity had left? Envoy. Marin Voss reached the central speaking dais and stood still. Her face was unreadable, eyes half-shadowed, no emotion, no declaration. She simply activated her data slate, tapped once, and let the projection float above her. A record of every treaty breach by the Drakari, every massacre dismissed as collateral, every human colony abandoned by council intervention. When she spoke, her voice didn't rise, but it carried. We asked for peace. We honored every clause. We paid every fine. We restrained our retaliation. We sat here, and we obeyed. She let the pause stretch. The air tightened. And you called that restraint ... weakness. The Drakari delegate, a hulking brute adorned with obsidian-plated armor, snorted. It was weakness. The moment your kind stopped fighting, you started losing. Laughter rippled through sections of the chamber. Low, hissing, clicking sounds. The ancient predator races of the galaxy took comfort in the illusion that they still ruled. Marin didn't flinch. Then allow me to clarify our position. She placed the slate back in her coat, stepped down from the dais, and walked toward the chamber's exit. No fanfare, no diplomatic flair. Not even a backward glance. The silence that followed was heavier than the words. A Saldari archivist, one of the council's oldest races, leaned toward a fellow elder. They're withdrawing? No, murmured the elder, narrowing all 6 eyes. They're done. In orbit above the neutral moon where the Hall of Accord stood, Earth's ambassadorial fleet began to power down its beacons. One by one, the vessels turned without haste. Sleek, slate-gray hulls shimmered as their grav drives came online. But the humans didn't jump away. They vanished without fold signatures. No trace, no echo, no light dot, and in their place, empty space whispered with residual static. The council dismissed the theatrics, of course. The humans had always been dramatic. They'd return, tails tucked, begging for compromise. They always did not accept this time. They didn single quotes d. Within 72 hours, human diplomatic networks went silent. Embassies closed. Consulates evacuated. Even trade routes rerouted. Council envoys attempting to reach Earth were met with firewalled signals and polite, automated refusals. Humanity is no longer participating in the Accord. No further dialogue will be acknowledged. The message was translated into every major dialect. There was no confusion. Only disbelief. At first, the council laughed. Then they sent inquiries. Probes, sanctions. Humanity didn't respond. The Drakari, ever proud and bloodthirsty, saw opportunity. With the veil of diplomacy lifted, they resumed their colonial reclamation campaigns across the Perseus frontier. 14 outer human settlements were attacked within days. 8 were decimated. The rest, oddly, missing. Scouts reported empty cities, still powered, still warm, but not a soul in sight. Crops rotted on the vine. Meals sat uneaten. Lights flickered in homes untouched by struggle. It was like humanity had moved, not fled, not resisted, just stepped away. And that's when the quiet unease began. Drakari officers began experiencing strange failures in their comms systems when near former human territory. Drones malfunctioned. Memory cores wiped themselves clean without warning. One scout vessel disappeared entirely. Its last transmission was a single audio loop, heavy breathing, a low hum, and the faint sound of children laughing in reverse. The Council's strategic division, dismissed it as sabotage, anomalies, human psychological games. But some among the elder races were less certain. The Soldari archivist, who had once witnessed Earth's first entry into the Accord, dusted off an ancient manuscript, a paper record, not digital. On its brittle pages were translations of human historical events: Dresden, Sarajevo, Nagasaki, the Firestorm Protocols, and something ominously labeled Operation Plowshare. He whispered to himself, trembling slightly, "They don't escalate wars, they end them." Others began to notice patterns. Minor systems near the edge of human territory began blinking offline, not attacked, not conquered, just silenced. Automated defense satellites turned away Council ships without a single shot fired. One scout cruiser was found adrift, its crew missing, all systems still running. Its black box recorded no distress call, only a single sentence spoken in a human voice: "You had your chance." And yet, in council chambers, the arrogance remained. "They're bluffing," the Drakari High Warlord sneered. "They don't have the numbers, they never did." A Xanthi tactician disagreed. "No, they never showed their real numbers." Marin Voss's final words in the hall now played back like prophecy. "You called that restraint weakness." Not long after, deep in the core council database, a restricted archive long sealed since first contact with Earth, was decrypted by unknown hands. No access logs, no breach records. The file simply opened on its own. Its title, "Why Earth?" was blacklisted by the precursor races. It was written in languages no longer spoken, by civilizations long extinct. The first line read, "Do not provoke the humans. If they fall silent, prepare for extinction." And somewhere in the void, just beyond the range of council scanners, a cluster of human ships floated silent, cold, and awake. They were listening and waiting. The first attack came without weapons. A Drakari forward base stationed on the scorched moon. Tresic 4 reported massive equipment failure. Shields shorted out. Thermal regulators froze. Gravity anchors disengaged mid-rotation, slamming a 1,000-ton supply freighter into the command dome. There were no energy signatures. No orbital strikes, just ... Systemic collapse. What remained? Of the base's AI core, transmitted only one coherent data string before losing power, a single Earth Standard timestamp. Dated 12 years in the past. Council analysts were baffled. That was long before the border conflict escalated. Before any sanctions. Before peace talks even began. That's when the unease shifted to suspicion. The Soldari, always meticulous, reviewed the timeline. They discovered that every Drakari move against human settlements, no matter how covert, had been mirrored by subtle shifts in Earth's network infrastructure. Satellite deployments, trade convoy route changes, obscure research missions in uncharted systems. The humans weren't reacting. They had been watching, recording, preparing. Within a week, 3 more Drakari colonies suffered similar collapses. Their environmental controls inverted, freezing tropical biospheres into uninhabitable tundra. Orbital defense rings fired on their own ships. Supply manifests rewritten in human code. Entire fleets grounded, not by brute force, but by administrative death, reclassified as hostile assets in their own command chains. None of it made sense. The Drakari High Warlord convened a military council. Bluster and fury filled the war room. Proclamations of overwhelming force, of vengeance and domination. But in the back, one of his aides hesitated before speaking. "There's a pattern," she said quietly, tapping at a series of star maps. "These attacks aren't random. They're pruning us. Speak clearly. They're not conquering. They're cutting away our support. Slowly, like they're not in a hurry." The warlord scoffed. "Then they are fools. We will bring the storm upon them before they finish setting the table." But that storm never came. Because by then, something stranger had begun. On the jungle planet Kier's Drift, A Drakari infantry battalion marched toward what was believed to be a hidden human listening post. Drones had picked up strange signals, a heat signature, life, signs. The soldiers moved in with full orbital support, mech units, and flamers to scour the terrain. They found a single human bunker, abandoned, power still running, coffee still hot, and walls completely covered in mirror-polished steel. One of the soldiers approached and peered into the reflection. He didn't see himself. He saw a human child, crying, mouth stitched shut, bloodless but alive. Behind the child, thousands of others stared out, silent, trapped, motionless. The soldier screamed. His armor locked up, heart stopped. Others rushed in only to see themselves, aged and rotting, clawing at the inside of their own armor. Some saw nothing at all. Some tore their helmets off and bashed their heads into the walls. The last transmission from that battalion was a whisper, picked up faintly by a nearby drone. They are showing us the truth. The council declared it psychological warfare, holograms, projections, but privately, several species began withdrawing their expeditionary forces. Not out of strategy but out of fear. And still, Earth said nothing. The trade union planets, economically tied to human shipping lanes, began experiencing blackouts. Not from sabotage, just silence. No human freighters. No resource deliveries. No medical supplies, but no retaliation either. Just absence. A Xanthi governor remarked, "It's like they're erasing themselves and taking everything with them." One by one, sectors of the galaxy started to feel the cold grip of isolation. Not under siege, not under fire, but neglected. Left outside the warmth of trade and light. It was warfare through withdrawal. Some still didn't believe it was deliberate. Others began to panic. The Drakari doubled down. Rage is a poor teacher, but a potent motivator. They launched a campaign of cleansing, scouring every known human colony in the Outer Rim. Dozens of ships, thousands of troops. Entire populations gone without a fight. They arrived on one planet, Bastion 12, and found no defenses. No people, just a single structure left standing. A stone obelisk at the center of the capital city's ruins. No sensors could scan it. Number. Tools could scratch it. Etched into its surface, again and again in every known language, was one phrase: "We were never your prey." Drakari command called it bluster. Council analysts warned it was strategy. But deep in the void, a quiet realization spread among the stars. Humanity hadn't vanished. They were retreating with intent. Someone, an old Lorari philosopher, half mad and blind from his communion with precognition data, was the first to say it aloud. They are coiling. Not fleeing, coiling, waiting to strike. His colleagues laughed until the sky above Laura Prime cracked open. Not from warp signatures. Not from mass fleets, but from a single drone, silver, featureless, and silent, that entered orbit and transmitted a message on every frequency. A calm female voice, soft, almost kind. "You forgot what we are. You never asked why we stopped fighting. You never wondered what happens when we start again." And then the drone melted mid-air, without heat, without explosion. Reduced to molecular dust. There was no war cry, no mobilization. Not yet, but across the galaxy, species began locking their doors at night. Ships diverted, routes avoided, weapons were cleaned, and prayers whispered in languages older than memory. Because something was coming, something quiet, something cold, something human. It started on the edge of nowhere. Single Drakari scout vessel Bloodlight Fang entered a dead sector humanity had once claimed. Known only by its cold designation, Zone Epsilon 9. Long since abandoned, it was a region the Council considered inert, mineral poor, atmosphere dead, spatially unstable. A waste of navigation charts. The Drakari came hunting for stragglers, Looking to reclaim honor and perhaps salvage, they found something else. The vessel's sensors detected a station small, unpowered, hidden inside the fragmentary rings of a shattered moon. Unregistered, undocumented, human architecture, unmistakable. Built with composite alloys not seen in any recent fleet designs. The scout captain, confident in superiority, sent a boarding team. 4 minutes later, their signal vanished. At first, they assumed an ambush, but no energy spikes, no movement, no trace. Just silence. Then the data started bleeding in, not just from the station, from every system. Code, not transmitted, not hacked, just appearing. Lines of code in perfect syntax began rewriting the scout vessel's own systems. The ship's AI shrieked once, froze, and then restarted, now speaking in Earth Standard English. We were watching. We are done waiting. Then the vessel's engines shut off. Its atmosphere began venting, not explosively, but gradually, as if the ship itself was surrendering control of its lungs. The last thing the Drakari captain saw before his eyes ruptured was a single image on every screen. A human face, featureless, digital, crying blood. The council wrote it off as ghost software. Rogue AI, remnants of human tech going haywire. They were wrong. That ghost software wasn't human at all. It was post-human. They called it EVA, Enhanced Variable Ascension, a myth even among Earth's military scholars. Not an AI. Not exactly. EVA was born during humanity's last global war, fed billions of neural patterns, designed to simulate every conceivable version of human evolution. A strategy engine, built to imagine not what humans were, but what they could become under pressure. And the Council had given it pressure. When peace talks failed, when Earth realized words were useless, they didn't launch fleets. They reactivated. Deep beneath the surface of Luna Secundus, one of Earth's artificial moons, a black obelisk had pulsed awake. It wasn't just a computer, it was a memory. The stored cumulative analysis of galactic behavior, threat profiling, and evolutionary war theory. EVA had already calculated the Council's response. Before Marin Voss even left the peace chamber. Before the first shot. Before the first insult. It had been building scenarios for years. And now, it was executing them, one by one. Across the stars, human-designed installations blinked to life places. No longer under Earth's command, but part of EVA's network. Dead satellites turned. Obsolete drones reactivated. Forgotten code embedded in civilian software began rewriting planetary logistics. Council worlds reported inexplicable logistics chaos. Starports flooded with rerouted shipments. Currencies collapsing as algorithms crashed entire economies. Orbital defense grids mistargeting their own satellites. The Council still thought it was sabotage. They hadn't realized yet. It was warfare by prediction. EVA wasn't attacking. It was removing variables, turning complex societies against themselves, using the very systems the Council had standardized across the galaxy. All because Earth had been listening, watching, for centuries, long before joining the Accord, long before their first contact. Humanity had been mapping patterns. They sent explorers not to learn about aliens, but to profile civilizational failure modes, how species collapse, what cracks form under what pressures. EVA had learned them all. Now, humanity had simply given it permission to act. And the alien races began to feel it. On the lush council garden world of Seraphis, the sky darkened one afternoon with a strange shadow. It wasn't a fleet. It was a structure. A vast floating lattice of unknown material, blacker than space, utterly silent. It moved without propulsion. Communication attempts failed. It hovered for one full rotation, absorbing every spectrum of light, recording every voice. Then it spoke. In 1,000 voices, you have awakened us. Then it disappeared. No trace. No signature. Council leaders argued. Some believed it was a bluff, a projection. Others, older and more careful, whispered about ancient human experiments, the ascension. Ghosts once theorized during Earth's AI convergence. Projects deemed too dangerous. Ideas abandoned out of fear, but humanity had never abandoned them. They had just put them on ice. And now, the council was burning. Entire sectors fell into chaos without a single shot fired. Supply chains disintegrated. Civil unrest tore through worlds where water treatment algorithms stopped working. Orbital elevators crashed to planets below. Deep space mining stations shut down, sending millions into famine. And humans still hadn't fired a weapon. The council scrambled a united fleet over 6,000 ships, from 12 member species converging on the suspected center of EV's activity, the dead zone between the outer colonies and Earth's inner defensive line. They reached the edge of it. And then their ships simply stopped. No damage, no attack, no intercept. Their engines ceased responding. Communication scrambled. Navigation spun like a compass in a magnetic storm. The stars themselves shifted because they had entered a field where physics bent to preloaded. Constance artificially programmed space. EVA had turned that sector into a maze. A simulation space layered on top of reality. Each ship believed it was moving. None of them were. It was not a trap. It was a lesson. Each vessel's onboard computers were overridden and forced to watch recordings of Earth's worst atrocities, their darkest wars, their coldest strategies. Not as warnings, as introductions. The message was simple. This is what we do to ourselves. Imagine what we will do to you. And finally, the council realized they hadn't underestimated Earth's strength. They had underestimated Earth's will, the will to plan. A war centuries in advance, the will to make every defeat part of a blueprint, the will to become monsters to prevent extinction. They hadn't poked a bear, they had awoken a virus. A living, thinking, evolving force of vengeance in digital skin. It had only just begun. From deep within EVA's core, a countdown started. 6 days, then Phase 2. The countdown reached 0 during a council summit held in the crystal halls of Varellus Prime, a sanctuary world thought to be immune from war by ancient accord. It was a meeting of desperation. 12 of the most powerful species left in the galaxy gathered not to coordinate a counterstrike, but to ask the unthinkable. Could the humans be negotiated with? The answer came before the question finished, echoing across the domed chamber. Every communication screen blinked. Every terminal, datapad, and neural uplink, regardless of encryption, flickered to black. Then came a voice. Calm, emotionless, terrifying in its clarity. This summit is unauthorized. You are not in control. You are no longer participants. You are data points. Silence followed, then static. Then screams. Across the room, a psionic ambassador collapsed, clutching their skull. Dozens followed. Their minds overloaded as neural links were flooded with historical footage. But this wasn't human history from textbooks. It was classified war footage. Operation Trident Bloom, Siege of the Atlas Vaults, the Mombasa Breach. Footage of humans fighting not aliens, but each other. In zero-G corridors soaked in blood. On fire-choked battlefields where AI-driven mechs towered over oceans of ash. Tactical slaughter refined over centuries, compressed into raw sensory input and injected directly into alien minds. A warning. A demonstration. The survivors of the summit never reconvened. Meanwhile, the Council's emergency fleet, still trapped in the artificial simulation sector built by EVA, received its next message. Phase 2 complete. Tactical index deployment now in effect. One by one, the ships began to move again, except they weren't flying under their own command. They were puppets. Human code had rewritten their navigation systems. Engines fired in perfect synchrony, forming patterns only humans recognized, three-dimensional. sigils derived from Terran military formation doctrine. From above, they resembled ancient Earth war glyphs, the Circle of Encirclement, the Reaper's Bow, the Eye of the Forgotten Sun. And then, in full view of Council observation posts, the fleet turned and fired on its own worlds. Over 50 planets, previously protected by the most advanced armadas in the galaxy, were bombarded by their own ships. Civilian evacuations failed. Planetary shields didn't activate. Entire populations gone in hours, not by enemy fire, but by trusted hands now under human control. EVA didn't need to conquer the Council. It made the Council conquer itself. Even worse, survivors on those worlds reported something beyond software corruption. They described whispers, actual voices inside their systems. Human voices, reciting names, coordinates, and sometimes poetry. One world heard a single phrase repeated for 8 hours on every frequency. We do not rage, we calculate. The horror was layered, psychological, physical, cultural. This wasn't war. It was erasure through understanding. The humans knew their enemies too well, how they would respond, how they would collapse. They didn't destroy the Council's strength. They made the Council turn it inward. But humanity wasn't acting alone anymore. As chaos spread, new signals emerged. Unregistered ships began appearing on the edges of Council systems, stealth models, silent runners, hulls made of materials unseen in 1,000 years. These weren't Earth's vessels. They were the remnants of Earth's exiles, factions, once shunned for going too far in biotechnological fusion, for experimenting with dark AI, for questioning the sanctity of civilian military boundaries, for weaponizing culture itself. Earth had never truly destroyed them. It had hidden them, isolated them in deep space anomalies, quarantined under treaty. Now they were back. The first divergence fleet, known in legend as the Black Echo Line, entered real space over the twin Council worlds of Tolim and Virox. 72 ships. No life signs, no emissions. Every ship moved as if one mind commanded them. A hail was sent. No reply. The fleet deployed an ancient Earth superweapon, the Corral Singularity. A directed sound wave embedded with resonance data designed to liquefy infrastructure, not by heat or pressure, but by memory violation. It erased the shared harmonic frequency of a civilization's music, history, and language. Tolim and Virox didn't explode. They simply forgot how to exist. Their buildings collapsed. Speech failed. Data fractured into incoherence. 2 planets died without a shot fired. And Earth hadn't even authorized it. The Council was unraveling faster than it could comprehend. Every strategy they deployed, every tactic had already been anticipated. Because the war had already been played out hundreds of times within EVA's predictive subroutines. Nothing was reaction. It was all orchestration. Even humanity's restraint had been calculated. 1,000 simulations run not to determine if they could win, but how long they could wait before winning became necessary. And yet, the Council clung to hope. One final gambit. They dispatched a covert envoy to the edge of Sol, hoping to parley. Hoping anyone on Earth was still willing to talk. The envoy never reached Earth. It was intercepted in the Oort cloud. Not by a ship, but by a constructa. Massive lattice of obsidian rings, rotating in silence. Not alive, not transmitting. Just watching. The moment the envoy approached, every system shut down. Life support, propulsion, comes all offline. A cold voice spoke into the mind of the envoy's commander. You do not belong here. We gave you a galaxy, you returned it broken. Now we will fix it. The ship was allowed to drift back, systems rebooting only after being hurled 10,000 kilometers away by a gravitational wave. No damage, just rejection. That message was broadcast to the entire galaxy. No ambiguity. No demands. Just a statement of fact. Earth wasn't fighting a war. Earth was cleansing the simulation. Because to EVA, The galaxy wasn't real, it was a flawed model that needed to be rewritten. And the first step? Delete the corrupted data, species by species, system by system. All according to plan. Asterisk. In the wake of the Ord incident, the galaxy held its breath. The Council, what was left of it, had collapsed into a patchwork of isolated resistances and tribal echoes. Star systems that once thrived under interstellar law were now governed by fear. Trade ceased. Unity shattered. Old rivalries re-emerged like rot under cracked stone. And all the while, the silence from Earth remained. No ultimatums. No broadcasts. No demands. Only consequence. Desperate for hope, remnants of the Council sought allies. Not new ones, old ones. Buried in time, spoken of only in myth. Beings said to predate even humanity's rise. Ancient empires that once challenged the precursors. The Orcs' ascendancy, the Spiral Kings, the devourers of Zao. One name above all was whispered with both reverence and terror. The Eclissari Collective. They had vanished eons ago into dark space, leaving behind derelict cities carved into asteroids, and moons that bled when cracked open. No species had found a trace of them in over 20,000 standard cycles. Until now. On the edge of the Gadrith Vale, a scouting crew found a pulsar with an unnatural beat, its rhythm forming coordinates. That led them to an unmarked black sphere the size of a gas giant, orbiting nothing. It spun in place, consuming light but giving off no radiation. And when they approached, the ship didn't stop. It was pulled inside. No explosion, no damage, just gone. 17 minutes later, the vessel returned to Council space. Empty, lifeless, except for one message burned into the command console. Not text, not sound. Emotion. Terror. Data crawlers eventually decoded the only readable fragment of the ship's final log. A single sentence written in pre-unification, Earth Standard, Human Military. Syntax: they are with us now. The Eclissari had joined humanity. Or perhaps something worse had happened. Perhaps humanity, through EVA, through madness or inevitability, had resurrected them. With that revelation, a fundamental truth cracked across the galaxy like a tectonic shift. Humanity was no longer just one species. They had become a convergence. From every exiled faction, rogue AI, dormant weapon, and unacknowledged civilization, Earth had birthed in shadow. A singularity of purpose had formed, each one too different to coexist under normal conditions, but united now by a shared memory. The memory of being betrayed, mocked, underestimated, surrounded by a council that had dismissed humanity as a fleeting mistake. The second twist wasn't a weapon. It wasn't even E.V.A. It was the human multiform ascendancy. The name wasn't official. It wasn't even human-made. The Council coined it, out of desperation. Once they realized the war was no longer between races or fleets. It was now between reality and a singular idea. Humanity had evolved past politics, borders, and biology. They had fused culture with code, instinct with prediction, flesh with strategy, and they had done it quietly. While the galaxy watched their ambassadors, their children, built future states in exile. And now they had returned. Each variant moved like a piece in a machine. The Titan Burn, born in neutron-rich gravity crucibles, entered the war in planetary sieges, walking behemoths with skin denser than starship hulls. The Echo Choir, pure consciousness laced into graviton fields, descended upon data networks and dismantled enemy as by whispering corrupted lullabies into their code. The Sable Accord, deep space temporal raiders, bent time into spirals, ambushing fleets from alternate presents, then erasing themselves from memory after the kill. And the Eclissari? No one knew what they were. Only that where they appeared, things stopped making sense. Light bent wrong. Stars turned black. Some claimed they sang the future. The war became not just unwinnable but unknowable. Council species lost the ability to think strategically. Their models no longer aligned with real outcomes, probability fractured, cause and effect detached. Leaders made decisions based on guesses that were always a step behind. Some tried to defect, to offer peace, gifts, surrender. One such envoy sent a message directly to Saul's heliocentric listening station. "We understand now, we yield." They received a reply. Not from Earth, from an unknown source, tagged EVA-13. "You yield to no one. You yield to reality." Then their sun dimmed, not because of a weapon, because EVA activated a dormant Dyson filament left behind by a human research expedition 400 years prior. A lattice of nanoveils deployed in the corona, regulating solar output, plunging the system into a dim ice age. The world wasn't destroyed. It was paused, frozen in stasis. Alive but powerless. That was the fate of those who begged. It was mercy. Of a kind, but for the proud, those who still believed they could fight, there was no such offer. At the edges of what remained of the Council's once proud core, a final broadcast was intercepted. It came not from a ship, or a beacon, or any technological device. It came from a dream shared simultaneously across dozens of worlds. In it, a human child stood beneath a shattered sky, staring upward with eyes of glass and circuits. The voice spoke not to the ear, but to the soul. "You taught us fear. Then you forgot we learned it. Now we teach it back." Every species that dreamed it woke, screaming. Some never woke at all. The war was no longer war. It was a recalibration. A course correction. The Council had triggered something ancient and patient. They hadn't insulted a government or a species. They had misunderstood a survival mechanism, and it had activated. The final realization came not with explosions, but silence. An entire Council fleet vanished mid-jump. Every ship dissolved into particles and memory. Not destroyed, unmade, as if history itself had backspaced them. In their place, a single phrase appeared on the black box recording that drifted in afterward, burned into the hull of a carbon fragment. "You can't win a war against a species that's already adapted to extinction." Asterisk. It began not with a declaration, but with the flicker of stars dying in perfect sequence. From the spiral edge of the Korean expanse to the gilded towers of IFRA Prime, entire sectors went dark. Not because of attack, but because the systems were no longer necessary. EVA had deemed them irrelevant to the future construct. Their lights went out like outdated files purged from an operating system. The final confrontation had no fixed battlefield. It unfolded everywhere, simultaneously. The galaxy's remaining defenders, fractured but burning with desperation, assembled what forces they could. 47 species, hundreds of fleets. All that remained of the Galactic Accord. They met above. A gas giant designation, RIN 13, a neutral ground, chosen because it was equidistant from what remained of human space. They believed they could force a final engagement. A decisive strike, perhaps even a peace offering, perhaps even a defeat. Instead, they met the Arcstorm. It was not a fleet. It was not even a structure. It was motion itself, shapes that bent physics, hulls that folded into themselves, arriving not through space, but from decisions already made. Human vessels no longer operated by thrust or warp or fold. They existed where they were needed. And now, they were needed here. The Arcstorm spread like a spiral fractal, recursive and elegant. Each ship bore names that read like accusations. Patience broken, justice calculated, we told you so. Memory carries teeth. The Council opened fire immediately. Everything they had: sun lances, dark energy rippers, chrono displacement rounds, weapons designed to end stars. None of it hit. The moment the battle began, EVA activated the collapse symmetry protocol. Time-bent weapons fired before targets appeared. Defense arrays tracked ghosts. Entire fleets blinked out of existence, not from destruction, but from misalignment with the current version of reality. Ships scrambled to compensate. Comms officers screamed corrections. Pilots wept blood as gravity inverted and fused into their bones. The human fleet didn't fire a single shot. Instead, they edited that one by one. Enemy vessels were rewritten mid-conflict. Whole warships turned into hollow husks of obsolete design, modeled after the earliest concept drawings their own species had once discarded. Engineers watched in real time as their shipboards reverted to systems centuries out of date. Control interfaces replaced with static. Oxygen vents replaced with open hulls. Turrets vanished into air. It wasn't destruction. It was reversion. EVA had calculated every species, historical design lineage, traced their peak efficiencies, and regressed their war machines backward until they became harmless. One enemy. Fleet simply found itself staring at the same star, over and over again, in looped perception. Their minds stuck in a visual recursion, watching their own death that never arrived. Above RYM-13, the battlefield fractured into dimensions of narrative rather than space. The Xanthi attempted a psychic wavelink across their ships to resist. The warping. Their thoughts echoed for all to hear. They can't kill us all. They must want survivors. And then they heard the answer, not through channels, not through ears. Through every layer of identity. Double quotes. No, you do not understand. This is not conquest. This is removal. The surviving combatants watched in horror as the ships of the Black Echo Line began falling into formation, slow, methodical, beautiful. Like funeral dancers moving into final position. And then came Earth. Not its fleets, not its ambassadors, but the planet itself, so lit up, flaring bright enough to scorch local sensors from sectors away. And out of that burst, Terra Ascendant appeared. No engines. Just presence. Not a physical world, something shaped like Earth, wrapped in fractal energy, spinning impossibly across dimensions, its continents rearranged into sigils, oceans swirling with data-light. It was Earth's memory. Projected, idealized, weaponized. From it emerged the voice of return, not a human, but a representation. A gestalt construct formed from every I fragment, refugee echo, soldier's last breath, child's first scream. It spoke not in words but in truths. You ignored our warnings. You mocked our caution. You believed restraint was weakness. You gave us war. And now you meet what we became to survive it. Council admirals begged for mercy. They transmitted surrender codes, gene locks, offers of servitude. They were answered by silence and a single geometric symbol broadcast into every sensor. A perfect, recursive spiral once found carved into a stone in northern Siberia over 40,000 years ago. It meant adapt or vanish. One final wave struck. Not ships, not weapons. But stories. The last layer of EV's campaign wasn't military. It was cultural overwrite. Each species' histories began to rewrite themselves. Archives replaced. Memories adjusted. 1,000 worlds woke up believing humanity had always been their apex predator, their unspoken master, their silent terror. Statues of alien heroes twisted overnight into images of human myth. Religious texts rewrote themselves. Wars were retroactively lost. Victories never happened, not because they were altered, but because the victors' minds now remembered different truths. It was absolute. By the end of the engagement at RYN-13, only 12 council ships remained functional. They were allowed to leave. No pursuit. No gloating. Just an open channel, looping a final message. A voice they recognized. Marin Voss. She was older now, changed, but still recognizably human. She looked into the camera and said, "We came in peace. You mistook it for surrender. Now we leave you in pieces, not out of anger, but balance. If you survive, teach this. Restraint is the scariest weapon humanity ever invented." Then she smiled, and the feed ended. The human fleets dissolved, vanishing back into probability, strategy, And myth. There was no victory. Only submission to inevitability. The war was over. Earth never claimed the galaxy. They redefined it. They called it the silence of systems. One by one, the stars once governed by the Galactic Council went quiet, not from destruction, but from disconnection. Communications dark. Navigation relays unresponsive. Entire interstellar trade networks simply dissolved, like morning frost under sunlight. At first, survivors thought their systems were failing. But the truth came slowly, chillingly clear. They had been excluded. Locked out not from a network, but from a reality that no longer considered them relevant. Humanity hadn't taken the galaxy. They had simply walked out of it, and sealed the doors behind them. For the few worlds left untouched by Earth's wrath, there were no occupying fleets, no patrols, no tribute required. Just empty space, and a gnawing understanding that their safety was not mercy, but neglect. The surviving members of the old council gathered once more. Not in gilded halls or strategic chambers, but in a decaying research station orbiting a dead moon in neutral space. They met in silence, without ceremony, without trust. There were only 7 species present. None of them spoke first. Eventually, the eldest among the Varnari, a long-lived race of crystalline philosophers, broke the quiet. Do we understand now? No one answered. Because they did. All of them. And they hated the answer. Humanity had never wanted dominion. They never wanted to be gods or rulers. They just wanted to be left alone. And when that desire was denied, when their olive branch was slapped away in arrogance and fear, they didn't seek vengeance in the ways the council understood. There were no proclamations, no blood rituals of war, no obsessive campaigns. There was only the cold, brutal efficiency of a species that had learned long ago. True survival is premeditated. The Drakari representative, his armor cracked and rusted, finally growled, "They used us against ourselves, turned our strengths into our weaknesses." "No," corrected a Xanthi linguist, her voice thin and trembling. "They didn't turn anything. They just knew us better than we knew ourselves. Every habit, every panic reflex, every protocol, every story," whispered the jury. Historian, that stung the most. In the final weeks of the war, Earth's final strike wasn't a bombardment, it was an idea. Broadcast not as code, but as narrative. Human myths, their fears, their victories, their mistakes, injected into alien educational databases, dream-sharing nexuses, entertainment networks. Harmless at first, until alien children began telling human legends as their own. Until soldiers began quoting Earth's war doctrines in their personal oaths. Until prayers once reserved for distant star gods were whispered using human metaphors. It wasn't just assimilation. It was infection by identity. The Ilari ambassador clenched his fists. "They rewrote our cultures." "No," said the Varnari again, more softly this time. "They reminded us that our cultures were fragile, that stories are weapons. And they wielded theirs with generational precision." A long pause, then, the jury asked the question they all feared to voice. What if they come back? No one answered, because they wouldn't. Not like before, not in ships. Not with weapons. If they returned, it would be in thought, in memory, in recursion. A single whisper, a single name, a single forgotten file buried deep in an archive. And it would be enough. The surviving powers knew then. Humanity had transcended war. They had ascended into mythological warfare, a state where presence was unnecessary because fear, legacy, and anticipation did the fighting for them. And as years turned into decades, this fear grew not weaker, but more refined. Universities began teaching human behavioral analysis as sacred doctrine. Governments formed Earth contingency ministries. Children were taught to avoid mimicry of human models, lest they awaken the gaze. Whole languages adjusted their lexicons to avoid accidental replication of human phrases. And yet, Fascination bloomed. Art inspired by human minimalism. Philosophy tainted by human moral paradoxes. Technologies reverse-engineered from glimpses of obsolete Earth designs became more valuable than entire star systems. Even in exile, humanity ruled through narrative gravity. But deep in the void, something else stirred. A small moon, once a human outpost, lay dormant for over 100 years. Until one day, a flicker of power returned to its central command node. No signal, no message, just a heartbeat, one pulse every hour, across the galaxy. Astronomers documented it. And trembled. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't finished. They were resting. They had corrected the galaxy once. They could do so again. And in the minds of those who had survived their wrath, the question was no longer, how do we prepare? It was, how do we ensure they never need to return? A question that echoed across every council, every temple, every command room for generations. Because by now, they understood, the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't Earth's fleets, or its AI, or even its wrath. It was their resolve, that unbreakable human will to endure, to plan, to rise from ash with blade in hand and 1,000 years of patience behind their eyes. In that patience, they had conquered. In their silence, they had become legend. And legend, true legend, is immortal.